Hi, everybody. It's Don and Jen Cowart with our weekly stewardship campaign message for you. As always, we're going to go through the 5 G's that we've been focusing on over the past weeks. We started with gratitude. We started with God's grace. Last week was generosity and giving. This week we'll focus on growth, and the following week we'll focus on gathering.
Every week we ask an essential question, something for everybody to think about. And the first one we asked people to think about was gratitude. And we asked people to think about how we show and share gratitude with each other.
This was the word cloud activity that we shared the very first week, and it has all of the answers that people gave us. And we put it into the word cloud with the larger words being the ones that were the most repetitive.
So with this particular example, thankful, sharing, and helping were the three main responses that we got in answering the question. So then we talked about God's grace, and we said, how can we give generously to St. David's on the Hill in gratitude for God's grace?
This was the idea board. It was a jam board that gave a little post-it note with each answer that we received. And there was lots to think about. People talked about donating future COVID stimulus money or a portion of it. People talked about praying. They talked about donating the money they might have spent had we had fundraising activities. There was a lot of talk about giving time, talent, treasure.
And then in the third week, we moved into thinking about generosity and giving. And if you recall, Ben West did a reflection, and we asked people to think about that reflection. And after hearing his message, what thoughts that they had about showing generosity and giving.
This was a hard one. It was hard for us. It's been hard for the parishioners. People spoke to us through emails or through their responses about the difficulty in answering this. One, I think because there's no getting around it. When you talk about generosity and giving, you're talking about something financial versus just time or talent. But also knowing that our budget situation is really critical, especially because we haven't been in person, and not being together in person is very difficult for people as well. So, I think I talked last week about how it prompted a conversation between us about how we focused on his message about, increasing your giving incrementally a little bit every year. And that works for us if we increase just a little bit a year. When we think about where we were when we started to where we are now, we're able to give a little bit more each year. But everybody took something different from his message. And I think that's what's important, is knowing that, the whole message may not work for you. You may take a piece of it and leave the rest. You may take several pieces of it. And depending where you are in your life depends on what you can do and what you can't do. And so the messages were all different.
So we picked this hamburger graphic. This is actually a graphic that we use with kids in school when they're building paragraphs. And every part of the paragraph is important. And we picked this graphic because we felt every part of what people shared with us was important. But in full disclosure, we did paraphrase some of our responses, because even though we got very few responses in comparison to last week, they were lengthy. And so what we tried to do is capture the essence of what people were saying and put them in a way that people could understand the message.
And
so
some of them were similar, and they focused on the same sorts of things. So we tried to combine some of the responses into one.
So, we're not going to read everyone word for word, but if you look at the top one, this particular person or people talked about looking at how much they pledge and trying to also think about what they would have spent on activities if they had been in church during normal times, and include that in part of their pledge.
Other people talked about the actual concept of tithing, what it means. I know personally I've always heard of tithing, and I kind of knew what it meant, but to really hear from someone who was trained nationally and someone who had actually done it and how it works was enlightening to me. It made a difference in my thought process when I thought about this.
And then, the idea, and we've said this in church for a long time, and our church has been very lucky to have people who are willing to give financially, but also give their time and talents to the church. And so we put that one right in the middle, because I think that's one that a lot of us can connect to, being part of vestry in the past, and Jen being part of vestry now, being people who are active in our church. when we haven't had money or we haven't had the way to give more than we were giving at the time, we try to give it another way. And so we want people to know that this is not just about financially what you can contribute to the church. It's about a much bigger approach and mindset.
I also thought it was important that in his message he said it's not just what you give to, St. David's. It's also if you contribute to the Episcopal Charities or if you contribute to a particular charity, like the what's the one out of
Right, the church beyond the walls.
Right, things like that all count. So it takes a little bit of the pressure off of you when you think I'm not doing enough or I'm not giving enough. We oftentimes are giving, but we just have to think about how we can maybe increase some of that giving for St. David's, because when we do reopen, we're going to need to increase our budget.
So one that we did not put on here, but I think is the segue to the next G of the 5G network, was how to increase our pledge units to get more people contributing so that the burden doesn't sit on such a small amount of people. So our next G has to do with growth.
We're going to talk about and focus on how we can grow our church, especially because we've been shuttered for so long. By the time we can reopen our doors, it will be more than a year. And there's going to be people who are participating online no matter what. Either they're far away or it's more comfortable or more convenient for them. But we need to kind of get our name out there and have people be interested in participating in the things that we do, the different ministries that we have going on, and coming to our different events that we're going to be able to have again, and our different services, whether we go back to the creative services that we had started to implement when this all happened last year, and our family service and our 8 o'clock service, whatever it looks like. We need to get people from our community back to hearing about St. David's and back to knowing who we are. And we need to grow our church because we need to grow the number of pledge units that we have.
And we heard one thing across all the G's that we've already presented. Every single time we get a response, people say to us that they can't wait to get back into church. They can't wait to be back together. It breaks our heart to read them because we can't wait to be back together either. But due to the situation we're in, we're trying to find a way to come up with solutions to problems that exist now and could exist in the future. And thinking about creative ideas is the way to kind of move forward in this and get to the point where we can be together again as a church and have fellowship and, share a service together and, shake each other's hands with a sign of peace and all the things that we find important. So the question for you to think about is, what can we do within the larger community, whether it's Cranston or outside of Cranston, to make our name known to people, to make people want to come and be a part of our church community? We're expecting a big response to this one because this is something that we've talked about before. This is something that I think a lot of people have an opinion about. So we're looking forward to a big response. I'm not going to say we were disappointed with last week's response. It was actually something we completely expected because of the 5 G's, that third G was the hardest one. And we expect it to be the hardest one when we're all done with this and we're wrapping this up and summarizing the stewardship campaign and going forward. But this one, growth, and the next one, gathering, we're expecting lots and lots of responses. And we're actually not expecting it. We're depending on it. Mm-hmm. And so we're hoping that as a church, we can continue to share great ideas.
And I think it's important, too, that everyone participate because our church depends on everyone. We need all hands on deck. We need, all soldiers in the pack, everybody helping to begin to look forward because we are on the cusp of being able to reopen, and we can't just depend upon the same 3 or 4 people to respond or to share ideas or to have ideas. We need all hands on deck. We need everybody in, and that way everybody can benefit and rejoice in being back together and being open because we are so close. It's February now, but we're looking towards the spring, we're looking towards the summer, we're looking towards outdoor time, and we are so close. The light is at the end of the tunnel here.
So as we wrap up this third G and moving towards the fourth G, we're just going to remind you again, you can always email Jen at jencoward@yahoo.com. You can respond through our Facebook page or if you're part of the Saints of St. David's page that Sharon set up, you could respond that way. You can do whatever you need to do to kind of reach out to us. But as long as you reach out, that's how you get there. It's not important to us. We know this message went a little bit long, but we thought that it needed a little bit more time and attention. And so we're looking forward to next week's responses and giving you an update of where we're at.
Have a great week, everybody.